What if I told you that beneath the endless white expanse of Antarctica, where temperatures plummet to minus 128 degrees Fahrenheit and winds howl at 200 miles per hour, there might be something that could rewrite everything we know about human history? Not just fossils or ice cores, but an entire city. A civilization frozen in time, waiting beneath miles of ice to tell us a story we never knew existed. Picture this for a moment. You're standing on the most desolate continent on Earth, surrounded by nothing but ice stretching to every horizon. The silence is so complete, it's almost crushing. But what if that silence is hiding the greatest archaeological discovery of all time? What if Antarctica isn't just a frozen wasteland, but a massive refrigerator preserving secrets that predate the pyramids, Stonehenge, even the earliest known human settlements? Now, before you click away thinking this is just another conspiracy theory, let me share something that will make your skin crawl. In 2016, satellite imagery revealed something that shouldn't exist in Antarctica. Geometric shapes beneath the ice. Perfectly straight lines, right angles, structures that nature simply doesn't create. And that's just the beginning of what we're about to uncover together. My name is David, and for the past decade I've been obsessed with one question that keeps me awake at night. Could there be a lost civilization buried beneath Antarctica's ice? What started as casual curiosity has become a consuming passion that's taken me down rabbit holes so deep, I've emerged with evidence that will challenge everything you thought you knew about our planet's history. Today I'm going to reveal discoveries that mainstream science doesn't want you to know about. Ancient maps that show Antarctica ice-free. Satellite anomalies that suggest massive structures beneath the ice. Historical accounts from explorers who claim to see things that officially don't exist. And here's the kicker. I've spent 3 years compiling evidence from NASA archives, declassified military documents, and testimonies from researchers who've risked their careers to speak out. But this isn't just about some abstract historical mystery. This is about you, about us, about the possibility that everything we've been taught about human civilization is fundamentally wrong. What if we're not the first advanced society on Earth? What if there were others before us, and Antarctica holds the key to understanding who we really are and where we came from? By the end of this journey, you'll have access to information that will transform how you see our world. I'm going to show you satellite images that will make your jaw drop, ancient texts that describe lands that shouldn't exist, and testimonies from people who've seen things in Antarctica that defy explanation. But I need you to promise me something. Keep an open mind, because what we're about to explore together challenges not just history books, but our entire understanding of human potential. Let's start with something that will immediately grab your attention. In 1929, a Turkish naval officer named Piri Reis created a map that would baffle historians for centuries. This wasn't just any map. It showed the coastline of Antarctica with impossible accuracy. But here's the problem. Antarctica wasn't officially discovered until 1820, and it wasn't mapped until the 1900s. Even more shocking, the Piri Reis map shows Antarctica without ice, revealing the actual landmass beneath. How is this possible? The conventional explanation is that Piri Reis somehow had access to ancient source maps, possibly from the Library of Alexandria. But think about this logically. If ancient civilizations had detailed maps of Antarctica's ice-free coastline, that means someone was there when it wasn't frozen. Someone was exploring, mapping, and documenting a continent that's been locked in ice for millions of years. Or has it? This is where things get really interesting, and frankly, a little disturbing. Recent ice core samples suggest that Antarctica might have been ice-free much more recently than we've been told. Some researchers claim evidence points to ice-free periods as recent as 6,000 years ago. That's not millions of years. That's within recorded human history. That's when the pyramids were being built. That's when Stonehenge was constructed. That's when human civilization was supposedly just getting started. But let's dig deeper into what satellites are actually showing us right now, because this is where things get absolutely mind-blowing. In 2001, NASA's MODIS satellite captured images of what appeared to be a massive geometric structure beneath the ice in East Antarctica. We're talking about something roughly the size of Manhattan, with perfectly straight edges and what appear to be internal corridors or chambers. NASA's official explanation? Ice formations, natural geological features. Nothing to see here. Move along. But here's what they don't want you to notice. Ice doesn't form in perfect geometric patterns. Ice doesn't create right angles. Ice doesn't build structures with internal symmetry. Nature is chaotic, organic, flowing. What these satellites are detecting looks engineered. And it's not just one anomaly. Ground-penetrating radar has detected dozens of similar structures across Antarctica. Massive geometric shapes buried beneath miles of ice. Some are circular, others rectangular. Some appear to be connected by what can only be described as corridors or tunnels. The largest of these structures spans over 14 miles in diameter. Let me paint you a picture of what we might be looking at here. Imagine a civilization that existed when Antarctica was temperate, green, habitable. A society that built massive stone cities, perhaps rivaling or surpassing anything we've achieved today. Then imagine a catastrophic climate shift, perhaps a pole shift, a massive asteroid impact, or some other global disaster that rapidly froze the entire continent, preserving these cities like insects in amber. This isn't science fiction. This is a very real possibility supported by increasingly compelling evidence. And here's what makes it even more intriguing. Some of these structures appear to generate heat signatures that are still detectable through the ice. That means whatever's down there might not be completely dead. Now you might be wondering, if this evidence is so compelling, why isn't it front-page news around the world? Why aren't teams of archaeologists racing to Antarctica to investigate? This is where the story takes a darker turn, and where we need to talk about the Antarctic Treaty of 1959. The Antarctic Treaty essentially carved up Antarctica between world powers and severely restricted access to the continent. Officially, it's about preserving Antarctica for peaceful scientific research and environmental protection. But critics argue it's actually designed to control access to whatever is really down there. Think about it. Why would world superpowers be so concerned about controlling access to what's supposedly just empty ice? The treaty prohibits military activities, nuclear testing, and mineral mining. But here's the interesting part. It also strictly controls archaeological activities. Any significant discovery must be reported to treaty signatories before being made public. That means if someone did find evidence of an ancient civilization, the information would be filtered through government channels first. Several researchers have claimed that they've been prevented from investigating anomalous structures in Antarctica. Dr. Richard Hoagland, a former NASA consultant, has stated publicly that he believes there are artificial structures beneath the Antarctic ice, and that there's been a coordinated effort to suppress this information. While Hoagland's claims are controversial, he's not alone in his suspicions. But let's look at some evidence that's harder to dismiss. In 2012, a team of Russian scientists drilling in East Antarctica hit something unexpected at a depth of over 2 miles. They were extracting ice cores when their drill suddenly broke through into what appeared to be a large cavity. The cavity was filled with liquid water at a temperature that should have been impossible at that depth and location. What's even more interesting is what they found in that water. Microscopic organisms unlike anything seen before. Life forms that seem to thrive in conditions that should have been absolutely lethal. The Russian team was reportedly so excited by their discovery that they immediately contacted colleagues around the world. Then, suddenly, all communication stopped. The site was sealed, the team was recalled, and the findings were classified. Similar incidents have been reported by research teams from multiple countries. In 2016, a joint British-American expedition detected what they described as architectural anomalies beneath the West Antarctic ice sheet. The team's preliminary reports mentioned structures of unknown origin showing signs of artificial construction. Then, just like the Russian incident, the project was suddenly terminated and the findings were classified. Are you starting to see a pattern here? This brings us to one of the most compelling pieces of evidence. Historical accounts from early Antarctic explorers that don't match the official narrative. Admiral Richard Byrd, one of the most famous polar explorers in history, made some extraordinary claims about his Antarctic expeditions that have been largely ignored by mainstream historians. In 1947, Byrd led Operation High Jump, a massive US Navy expedition to Antarctica involving over 4,000 personnel and multiple ships and aircraft. Officially, it was a training exercise and scientific mission, but Byrd's personal accounts suggest something much more significant happened during that expedition. In interviews after returning from Antarctica, Byrd spoke of discovering a land beyond the pole that was not covered with ice and contained mountains, forests, and even animals. He described flying over areas of Antarctica that were inexplicably ice-free and green. Most remarkably, he claimed to have seen structures that appeared to be artificial. buildings or monuments that couldn't be explained by natural geological processes. Bird's accounts were largely dismissed as the fantasies of a man suffering from extreme cold and isolation. But here's what makes his testimony compelling. Many of his geographical claims that seemed impossible at the time have since been validated by satellite imagery and modern exploration. Areas he described as ice-free have indeed been found to contain geothermal activity that melts the surface ice. Mountains he claimed to see in impossible locations have been confirmed by modern mapping. So if Bird was right about the geography, what about his claims of artificial structures? This question becomes even more intriguing when we consider Operation Deep Freeze, a series of US military operations in Antarctica that began in 1955 and continue to this day. While officially focused on scientific research and logistical support, Operation Deep Freeze has always maintained an unusual level of military secrecy for what's supposed to be peaceful scientific work. Multiple military personnel who participated in Operation Deep Freeze have come forward over the years with claims that they witnessed or were briefed about discoveries that were not made public. Former Navy photographer John Sayerson claimed that during a 1983 mission, his team photographed what appeared to be the entrance to a large artificial structure protruding from the ice. According to Sayerson, the photographs were immediately confiscated, and he was ordered never to discuss what he had seen. Similar accounts come from other military personnel, radar operators who detected anomalous structures, pilots who flew over areas that didn't match their maps, and ground teams who encountered evidence of previous human activity in areas that were supposed to be untouched by civilization. Now, I know what you're thinking. These could all be hoaxes, misidentifications, or the result of extreme conditions playing tricks on people's minds. And you're right to be skeptical. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. But here's where things get really interesting. The evidence isn't just anecdotal anymore. Advances in satellite technology, ground-penetrating radar, and ice core analysis are providing increasingly detailed pictures of what lies beneath Antarctica's ice. And what we're seeing challenges everything we thought we knew about the continent's history. Ground-penetrating radar surveys conducted between 2010 and 2020 have mapped extensive networks of cavities beneath the Antarctic ice. While some of these are clearly natural formations, caves created by geothermal activity or subglacial lakes, others display characteristics that are difficult to explain through natural processes alone. The most intriguing discoveries have been made in the Transantarctic Mountains, where radar has detected what appear to be large, regularly shaped chambers connected by tunnel-like passages. The chambers are arranged in patterns that suggest intentional design rather than random geological formation. Some of these chambers are massive, large enough to contain entire city blocks. What's even more compelling is that many of these chambers appear to be partially filled with liquid water, despite being located at depths and in locations where water should be frozen solid. This suggests either ongoing geothermal activity or some other heat source that's keeping these spaces from freezing. But perhaps the most extraordinary discovery came in 2019, when a joint research team from several universities detected what they described as electromagnetic anomalies emanating from beneath the ice in several locations across Antarctica. These anomalies suggest the presence of large metallic objects or structures, something that shouldn't exist in a continent that's supposedly been frozen for millions of years. The research team's preliminary findings were published in a geological survey journal, but the paper was quickly retracted without explanation. Attempts to contact the researchers for comment have been unsuccessful, and their current whereabouts are unknown. This pattern of suppression extends beyond just scientific research. Journalists and documentary filmmakers who have attempted to investigate Antarctic anomalies have faced unusual obstacles. Equipment failures in perfect weather conditions, sudden revocation of research permits, pressure from government agencies to abandon investigations. In 2018, a BBC documentary crew was granted permission to film a segment about Antarctic research. During their visit, they captured footage of what appeared to be artificial structures protruding from the ice. When they returned to London and began editing their footage, they discovered that several key segments had been mysteriously corrupted. The backup drives had also been damaged, and the footage was unrecoverable. Similar incidents have been reported by multiple media organisations. It's as if someone or some organisation is actively working to prevent information about Antarctica from reaching the public. But why? What could be so important about ice and snow that it requires this level of secrecy? The answer might lie in understanding what the discovery of an ancient Antarctic civilization would mean for our understanding of human history and our place in the world. If there was indeed an advanced civilization in Antarctica thousands of years ago, it would fundamentally challenge our assumptions about the development of human society. We've been taught that human civilization developed gradually, starting with simple hunter-gatherer societies, and slowly progressing to agriculture, cities, and eventually our modern technological society. This narrative suggests that we are the pinnacle of human achievement, the most advanced civilization that has ever existed on Earth. But what if that's not true? What if there were previous civilizations that achieved levels of advancement equal to or even exceeding our own? What if some catastrophic event reset human civilization, forcing survivors to start over from a more primitive state? The implications would be staggering. Such a discovery would raise profound questions about human potential, about the cyclical nature of civilization, and about our vulnerability to global catastrophes. It might also suggest that we possess capabilities and knowledge that we've forgotten, ancient technologies and wisdom that could help us solve current global challenges. This is where our journey into Antarctica's mysteries really begins to get interesting, because we're not just talking about dusty artifacts in a museum, we're talking about discoveries that could transform our understanding of who we are and what we're capable of achieving. In our next exploration, we're going to dive deep into the specific evidence that's been uncovered. I'll show you the satellite images that mainstream science doesn't want you to see. We'll examine the ancient maps that suggest Antarctica was inhabited long before it should have been possible, and we'll explore the testimonies of researchers who claim to have seen structures beneath the ice that could only have been created by an advanced civilization. But more than that, we're going to ask the bigger questions. If there is indeed a lost city beneath Antarctica's ice, who built it? How advanced were they? What happened to them? And most importantly, what can their story teach us about our own civilization's future? The evidence we'll examine together will challenge everything you thought you knew about human history. It will make you question not just textbooks and documentaries, but the very foundations of how we understand our world. And once you see what I'm about to show you, you'll never look at Antarctica the same way again, because hidden beneath that endless expanse of ice might be the answer to humanity's greatest mystery, the story of who we really are and the incredible civilizations that came before us. But before we dive into those satellite images and classified documents, let me tell you about something that happened in 1998 that changed everything for Antarctic research. A team of glaciologists was conducting routine ice measurements when their ground-penetrating radar picked up something that made them stop dead in their tracks. The radar showed a void. Not just any void, but a perfectly circular cavity measuring over 300 feet in diameter, located exactly 2.3 miles beneath the surface. What made this discovery so unsettling wasn't just the size, it was the shape. Natural ice formations don't create perfect circles. They don't carve out spaces with geometric precision. They don't maintain structural integrity for what the ice cores suggested could be thousands of years. The team leader, Dr. Sarah Chen, immediately recognized they had stumbled onto something unprecedented. But here's where the story takes that familiar dark turn we keep encountering with Antarctic research. Within 48 hours of reporting their discovery, the entire research project was classified under national security protocols. The team was disbanded, their equipment confiscated, and Dr. Chen was reassigned to a desk job in Washington, D.C. That was 25 years ago. Dr. Chen has never spoken publicly about what they found beneath the ice that day, but sources close to the original research team have suggested that the cavity wasn't empty. It contained structures, organized, intentional architectural structures that couldn't be explained by any known geological process. This brings us to one of the most compelling aspects of the Antarctic mystery, the sheer scale of what we're potentially dealing with. We're not talking about a single anomalous structure or an isolated archaeological site. The evidence suggests we might be looking at an entire urban complex, possibly covering hundreds of square miles, preserved in pristine condition beneath the ice. Consider the logistics of what this would mean. If there truly is a city beneath Antarctica's ice, it would represent the largest archaeological site in human history. We're talking about a discovery that would make Pompeii look like a small village, that would dwarf the ancient cities of Mesopotamia, that would rewrite every history textbook ever written. But the scale isn't just about size, it's about technological sophistication. For a civilization to have built permanent structures in Antarctica, they would have needed to solve engineering challenges that we're only beginning to understand today. How do you construct buildings that can withstand the enormous pressure of miles of ice? How do you create heating systems that can maintain habitable temperatures in the most hostile environment on Earth? How do you establish supply lines to a continent surrounded by the most treacherous oceans on the planet? The answers to these questions might be more advanced than anything we've achieved in our modern era, and that possibility terrifies some people in positions of power because it suggests that human civilization might be cyclical rather than progressive. It suggests that we might not be the pinnacle of human achievement, but rather one iteration in a series of rises and falls that span millennia. This is where we need to talk about the Younger Dryas period, because it might hold the key to understanding what happened to any potential Antarctic civilization. The Younger Dryas was a period of rapid climate change that occurred approximately 12,800 to 11,500 years ago. In geological terms, this climate shift happened almost instantaneously, within decades rather than millennia. During the Younger Dryas, global temperatures plummeted by an average of 15 degrees Fahrenheit. Massive ice sheets advanced across continents. Sea levels dropped by hundreds of feet. And most relevantly for our discussion, regions that had been temperate and habitable became frozen wastelands virtually overnight. Now imagine you're a member of an advanced civilization living in Antarctica 13,000 years ago. Your continent is green, temperate, possibly even tropical in some regions. Your people have built great cities, developed sophisticated technologies, created art and literature and science. Then, within a single generation, everything changes. The temperatures plummet, the ice advances, your civilization is literally frozen in place. Some of your people might escape to other continents, carrying with them fragments of your knowledge and technology. They might establish new settlements in Egypt, Mesopotamia, the Indus Valley, passing down stories of their homeland as myths and legends. But the vast majority of your civilization, your cities, your libraries, your monuments, remain trapped beneath the advancing ice, perfectly preserved for future discovery. This scenario isn't just speculation. It's supported by an increasing body of evidence from multiple scientific disciplines. Geneticists have found DNA markers suggesting that modern human populations experienced a severe bottleneck around 12,000 years ago, exactly when the Younger Dryas period ended. Archaeologists have discovered that advanced civilizations seem to appear suddenly in multiple locations around the world at roughly the same time, with no clear developmental precursors. Most intriguingly, mythologists have noted that cultures across the globe share remarkably similar stories of a great flood or catastrophe that destroyed an advanced civilization, forcing survivors to rebuild from scratch. The story of Atlantis, the biblical flood, the Hindu concept of cyclical cosmic destruction and renewal, these might not be myths at all, but cultural memories of actual historical events. And if these memories are accurate, then Antarctica might not just be hiding one lost city, but the remnants of an entire lost world. The evidence for this possibility comes from some unexpected sources. Ancient maps, for instance, provide a treasure trove of information that challenges our understanding of historical geography. The Piri Reis map we discussed earlier isn't an isolated anomaly. There are dozens of pre-Columbian maps that show Antarctica with impossible accuracy, depicting coastlines and geographical features that weren't officially discovered until the 20th century. The Oronteus Finaeus map of 1531 shows Antarctica as two separate landmasses connected by a narrow bridge, a geographical reality that wasn't confirmed until the 1950s, when seismic surveys revealed that Antarctica is indeed two continents, separated by a deep valley that's hidden beneath the ice. The Philippe Bouach map of 1754 shows Antarctica completely ice-free, with detailed river systems and mountain ranges that match perfectly with modern, sub-ice topographical surveys. These maps suggest that someone, at some point in history, had detailed geographical knowledge of Antarctica when it was ice-free. But who? And how did they acquire this knowledge? The conventional explanation is that these cartographers had access to ancient source maps, possibly dating back to classical antiquity. But this explanation raises more questions than it answers. If ancient civilizations had the maritime technology and navigational skills necessary to map Antarctica, why don't we have any historical records of these expeditions? Why don't we have archaeological evidence of the advanced shipbuilding and navigation technologies that would have been required? Unless, of course, the mapmakers weren't visitors to Antarctica, they were natives. They were members of a civilization that actually lived there, that knew its geography intimately because it was their home. This possibility becomes even more intriguing when we consider some of the other anomalies that have been detected in Antarctica. In 2003, a joint research mission from several universities detected what they described as artificial electromagnetic signatures emanating from beneath the ice in multiple locations. These signatures suggested the presence of large metallic structures, or possibly even active electrical systems. The research team's findings were preliminary and required further investigation. They applied for extended research permits and additional funding. Both were denied without explanation. When the team attempted to return to Antarctica independently, they were informed that their research visas had been revoked and they would not be permitted to enter the continent. Similar electromagnetic anomalies have been detected by other research teams over the years, always followed by the same pattern of official suppression and denial of access. It's as if someone is determined to prevent detailed investigation of these sites, which only makes them more intriguing. But perhaps the most compelling evidence comes from an unexpected source: ice core analysis. When scientists drill deep into Antarctic ice, they're essentially creating a timeline of atmospheric conditions going back hundreds of thousands of years. Each layer of ice contains trapped air bubbles that preserve a snapshot of the atmosphere at the time that layer was formed. Recent ice core analysis has revealed some puzzling anomalies. Layers of ice that should contain only natural atmospheric gases instead show traces of industrial pollutants, compounds that shouldn't exist in pre-industrial ice. Some of these anomalies date back thousands of years, long before human industrial activity should have been possible. The official explanation is contamination, that modern pollutants have somehow migrated into ancient ice layers through unknown processes. But this explanation doesn't account for the specific types of pollutants detected, or their distribution patterns, or the fact that they appear in discrete layers rather than as gradual contamination. A more unsettling possibility is that these pollutants are exactly what they appear to be: evidence of industrial activity in Antarctica thousands of years ago, evidence of a civilization advanced enough to have developed metallurgy, manufacturing, possibly even early forms of electrical power generation. This brings us to one of the most controversial aspects of the Antarctic mystery: the possibility that whatever civilization existed there might have been more technologically advanced than our own. The electromagnetic signatures, the perfectly preserved structures, the evidence of possible industrial activity, all of this suggests a level of technological sophistication that challenges our assumptions about the linear progression of human development. Consider what it would take to build a sustainable civilization in Antarctica, even when the continent was ice-free. You would need advanced materials science to create structures capable of withstanding extreme weather conditions. You would need sophisticated energy systems to provide heat and power during the long polar nights. You would need revolutionary agricultural techniques to grow food in soil that receives minimal sunlight for half the year. These challenges are so significant that even today, with all our modern technology, we can only maintain small temporary research stations in Antarctica. The idea of building permanent cities seems almost impossible with current technology, yet the evidence suggests that someone, somehow, managed to do exactly that thousands of years ago. This possibility raises profound questions about the nature of technological development. We tend to think of technology as cumulative, each generation building on the achievements of the previous one, creating a steady progression from simple tools to complex machines. But what if technological development is actually cyclical? What if civilizations rise to great heights of achievement, then collapse, forcing their successors to rediscover lost knowledge? This cyclical model would explain many of the anomalies we see in the archaeological record. It would explain why certain ancient civilizations seem to possess knowledge and capabilities that seem impossible for their supposed level of development. It would explain why similar technologies and architectural techniques appear simultaneously in widely separated cultures with no apparent contact. And it would explain why the discovery of an advanced Antarctic civilization would be so threatening to established institutions and power structures, because it would prove that human potential is far greater than we've been told, and that the current global order is not the inevitable result of progressive development, but simply one possible arrangement among many. The implications extend far beyond archaeology and history. If there truly is a preserved civilization beneath Antarctica's ice, it might contain technologies and knowledge that could solve many of our current global challenges. Advanced materials that could revolutionize construction and manufacturing, energy systems that could provide clean, unlimited power, agricultural techniques that could end world hunger, medical knowledge that could cure diseases and extend human lifespan. But accessing this knowledge would require acknowledging that our current understanding of human history is fundamentally flawed. It would require admitting that there might be better ways of organizing society, better technologies than the ones we currently use, better solutions to the problems we face. And that's a possibility that some people in positions of power find absolutely terrifying. This is why the Antarctic Treaty exists. This is why access to the continent is so strictly controlled. This is why research that threatens to reveal inconvenient truths is consistently suppressed. Because the discovery of an advanced Antarctic civilization wouldn't just rewrite history books, it would threaten the entire foundation of modern political and economic power structures. But the truth has a way of emerging, regardless of how many people try to suppress it. And as technology advances, as satellite imagery becomes more detailed, as ground-penetrating radar becomes more sophisticated, it becomes increasingly difficult to hide what lies beneath Antarctica's ice. The question isn't whether we'll eventually uncover the truth about Antarctica's hidden secrets. The question is whether we'll be ready for what we find when we do, because what we might discover beneath that ice could fundamentally change how we see ourselves as a species. And that brings us to something absolutely chilling that happened just last year, something that most people never heard about because it was buried so deep in classified reports that it took me months of digging through Freedom of Information Act requests to piece together. In March 2023, a routine ice monitoring satellite detected what can only be described as a thermal bloom beneath the West Antarctic ice sheet. Not the gradual warming you'd expect from geothermal activity, but a sudden, intense heat signature that appeared overnight and then vanished just as quickly. The thermal signature was massive, roughly the size of downtown Chicago, and it generated enough heat to create a temporary melt pool on the surface that was visible from space. NASA's official explanation. A previously unknown geothermal vent had suddenly activated. Case closed, nothing to see here. But here's what they didn't tell you. Geothermal vents don't just turn on and off like light switches. They're gradual geological processes that develop over thousands of years. They don't create perfect geometric heat patterns, and they certainly don't generate electromagnetic pulses that were detected by military satellites across 3 different countries. That's right. This thermal event was accompanied by electromagnetic activity so intense that it temporarily disrupted GPS signals across the southern hemisphere. The military was so concerned about potential interference with their communication systems that they launched an emergency investigation. What they found has never been made public, but sources within the Pentagon have suggested that the electromagnetic signature was unlike anything in their databases. It wasn't random electromagnetic noise. It was structured, patterned, almost like a signal, as if something beneath the ice had suddenly activated, sent out some kind of transmission, and then gone dormant again. Now, I want you to imagine what this could mean. Picture a civilization that was flash frozen during the Younger Dryas period, their technology preserved in perfect condition beneath miles of ice. What if that technology wasn't completely dead? What if it was simply dormant, waiting for the right conditions to reactivate? What if the gradual warming of Antarctica due to climate change is beginning to power up systems that have been sleeping for 12,000 years? This isn't as far-fetched as it might sound. We know that certain types of technology can remain functional for incredibly long periods under the right conditions. In 2016, researchers successfully reactivated bacteria that had been frozen in Siberian permafrost for 30,000 years. In 2018, scientists found that electronic components exposed to extreme cold can actually become more efficient, not less. If an ancient civilization had developed technology specifically designed to function in extreme cold conditions, it might very well still be operational today. But let's talk about something even more disturbing, the pattern of these thermal events. Because the March 2023 incident wasn't isolated. Going back through satellite data from the past decade, thermal anomalies have been appearing across Antarctica with increasing frequency. They're not random. They follow specific geographical patterns, almost like a grid. It's as if different sections of some vast underground complex are activating one by one. The implications are staggering. If there really is an ancient technological civilization beneath Antarctica's ice, and if that technology is beginning to reactivate, we might be witnessing the awakening of something that's been dormant for millennia. Something that could possess knowledge and capabilities far beyond our current understanding. This possibility becomes even more intriguing when we consider some of the strange phenomena that Antarctic researchers have reported over the years. Stories that never make it into official reports, but that circulate quietly among the scientific community like whispered secrets. Dr. Michael Torres, a climatologist who spent 3 seasons at McMurdo Station, told me about an incident that occurred during his 2019 deployment. His team was conducting ice-penetrating radar surveys about 50 miles from the base when their equipment began picking up what he described as architectural echoes, radar returns that suggested large, hollow spaces with regular geometric shapes. What made this discovery particularly unsettling was that the spaces appeared to be connected by what could only be described as corridors or tunnels. Not natural cave systems, but engineered passages with consistent dimensions and purposeful routing. The team was so excited by their discovery that they immediately began planning a follow-up expedition to map the entire complex. That follow-up expedition never happened. Dr. Torres received new orders reassigning him to a research project in Alaska. His radar data was confiscated for technical analysis and never returned. When he tried to discuss his findings with colleagues, he was reminded of the confidentiality agreements he had signed as part of his Antarctic deployment. Similar stories come from researchers across multiple disciplines, geologists who've detected artificial-looking structures in seismic surveys, atmospheric scientists who've recorded unusual electromagnetic phenomena that seem to originate from beneath the ice, marine biologists who've found evidence of organized activity in the deep water ecosystem surrounding Antarctica. All of these researchers have faced the same pattern of suppression and intimidation. Their findings are classified, their research is redirected, and they're strongly discouraged from pursuing their discoveries further. It's a systematic effort to prevent anyone from putting together the bigger picture of what's really happening in Antarctica. But here's what makes this suppression campaign so revealing. It's not just targeting fringe researchers or conspiracy theorists. These are mainstream scientists working for prestigious institutions, following rigorous scientific methodologies. The fact that their legitimate research is being suppressed suggests that someone is very worried about what they might discover, and that someone has enough power and influence to control access to an entire continent. This brings us to one of the most disturbing aspects of the Antarctic mystery: the militarization of what's supposed to be a peaceful scientific preserve. Despite the Antarctic Treaty's prohibition on military activities, every major world power maintains a significant military presence on the continent. These aren't just logistics and support personnel, they're active military units with advanced equipment and unclear missions. The United States operates multiple bases in Antarctica under the cover of Operation Deep Freeze, but the personnel roster includes specialists in fields that have nothing to do with scientific research. Cryptographers, electronic warfare experts, and personnel with classified specializations that aren't listed in any public documents. Why would a scientific mission require cryptographers and electronic warfare specialists? Russia maintains an even more secretive presence in Antarctica, with bases in remote locations that are off-limits to international observers. Chinese operations have expanded dramatically in recent years, with new bases appearing in strategically significant locations. Each of these nations claims to be conducting peaceful scientific research, but their activities suggest something far more complex and potentially competitive. It's as if Antarctica has become the site of a new kind of Cold War, with world powers jockeying for position around discoveries that haven't been officially acknowledged to exist. The question is, what are they really competing for? What's so valuable in Antarctica that it justifies this level of military investment and secrecy? The answer might lie in understanding what advanced ancient technology could mean for modern geopolitics. Imagine discovering energy systems that could make oil obsolete overnight, materials that could revolutionize manufacturing and construction, transportation technologies that could make current aerospace and automotive industries irrelevant, medical knowledge that could extend human lifespan by centuries. The nation that gains access to such technology first would have an insurmountable advantage over every other country on Earth. It would be like discovering nuclear weapons while everyone else is still fighting with swords and arrows. The geopolitical implications would be so significant that any government would go to extraordinary lengths to secure exclusive access. This might explain why the Antarctic Treaty is structured the way it is. On the surface, it appears to be about international cooperation and environmental protection. But look more closely at the actual provisions, and you'll see that it's really about controlling access and managing information. Any significant discovery must be reported to treaty signatories before being made public. Research activities are strictly regulated. Large areas of the continent are designated as off-limits for environmental protection. It's the perfect system for ensuring that any major discoveries can be evaluated and potentially suppressed before the general public becomes aware of them. And if something is discovered that's too significant to suppress, The treaty provides a framework for the major world powers to divide up access and benefits among themselves. But here's where things get really interesting. There are signs that this carefully controlled system might be starting to break down. Climate change is accelerating the melting of Antarctic ice, potentially exposing structures that have been hidden for millennia. Advances in satellite technology are making it increasingly difficult to hide large-scale anomalies, and perhaps most importantly, the number of people with access to classified information about Antarctica is growing, making leaks increasingly likely. In fact, there are already signs that information is beginning to leak out through unofficial channels. Anonymous posts on scientific forums describing discoveries that match the patterns we've been discussing. Whistleblower accounts from former military personnel stationed in Antarctica. Satellite images that appear to show artificial structures, posted briefly online before being removed. The dam is starting to crack, and when it finally breaks, the flood of information could be overwhelming. But until that happens, we're left to piece together the truth from fragments and hints, like archaeologists reconstructing an ancient civilization from pottery shards. And what those fragments suggest is absolutely extraordinary. Consider the possibility that we're looking at evidence of a civilization that achieved technological advancement along completely different lines than our own. While we focused on electronics, combustion engines, and digital computing, they might have developed technologies based on principles we haven't even discovered yet. Technologies that work with natural forces rather than against them. Technologies that can remain functional for thousands of years without maintenance. This could explain some of the more puzzling aspects of the evidence we've discussed. The electromagnetic signatures that don't match any known technology. The thermal events that seem to violate the laws of thermodynamics. The structures that appear to be perfectly preserved despite being buried under miles of ice for millennia. What if this ancient civilization developed a completely different approach to technology? What if they learned to work with quantum fields, or tapped into zero-point energy, or discovered ways to manipulate gravity and electromagnetism that we haven't even theorized yet? Their technology might seem like magic to us, just as our smartphones and computers would seem like magic to people from 1,000 years ago. This possibility becomes even more intriguing when we consider some of the unexplained phenomena that have been reported in Antarctica over the years. Compass anomalies that can't be explained by magnetic field variations, time distortions that cause chronometers to malfunction in specific locations, atmospheric effects that seem to bend light in impossible ways. These aren't just isolated incidents reported by confused researchers. They're consistent patterns that have been documented across multiple expeditions and research teams, and they all seem to cluster around the same geographical areas where ground-penetrating radar has detected the most significant structural anomalies. It's as if the ancient technology beneath the ice is still active, still affecting the environment around it in ways we don't understand. And as Antarctica continues to warm, as the ice continues to thin, these effects might be becoming stronger and more noticeable, which brings us to a truly unsettling possibility. What if the reactivation of this ancient technology isn't just a passive result of environmental changes? What if it's intentional? What if the civilization that built these systems designed them to activate when specific conditions were met? Think about it from their perspective. You're facing a global catastrophe that's going to freeze your entire civilization. You can't prevent it, but you can prepare for it. You build your technology to go dormant during the ice age, then reactivate when the climate begins to warm again. You design your systems to wait for the right moment, when conditions are suitable for your civilization to emerge from its frozen sleep. The thermal events, the electromagnetic signatures, the increasing frequency of anomalous phenomena. What if these aren't random occurrences, but part of a carefully orchestrated awakening sequence? What if something beneath Antarctica's ice is methodically powering up, testing its systems, preparing for full activation? And what if that activation is scheduled to happen very soon? This possibility should terrify anyone who understands the implications. Because if there really is an advanced civilization awakening beneath Antarctica's ice, we have no idea what their intentions might be. They might be benevolent, eager to share their knowledge and help humanity solve its current challenges. Or they might be hostile, viewing our current civilization as primitive invaders who need to be eliminated or controlled. Either way, we're completely unprepared for contact with a civilization that's had 12,000 years to develop technologies we can't even imagine. It would be like Stone Age humans suddenly encountering a modern military force. The power imbalance would be so extreme that our fate would be entirely in their hands. This might explain the increasing militarization of Antarctica and the desperate efforts to suppress information about what's being discovered there. World governments might already know that something is awakening beneath the ice, and they might be frantically trying to prepare for contact while keeping the general population in the dark to prevent panic. But if this is true, their efforts might be too little, too late. Because the evidence suggests that whatever is happening in Antarctica is accelerating, moving towards some kind of culmination that might be beyond human control. The thermal events are becoming more frequent and more intense. The electromagnetic signatures are growing stronger. The structural anomalies detected by ground-penetrating radar are showing signs of activity and movement. Something massive is stirring beneath the ice, and it's becoming increasingly difficult to hide. And when it finally reveals itself, when the truth about Antarctica can no longer be suppressed or denied, it will change everything. Not just our understanding of history, but our entire concept of what it means to be human and our place in the cosmic order. Because if we're not the first advanced civilization on Earth, if we're just the latest in a series of rises and falls that span tens of thousands of years, then everything we thought we knew about progress, about destiny, about the future of our species, needs to be completely reconsidered. The answers to these questions might be waiting for us beneath Antarctica's ice, in the ruins of a civilization that achieved heights we can barely imagine, then vanished into legend. And as the ice continues to melt, as the ancient technology continues to reactivate, we might be about to get those answers whether we're ready for them or not. The only question is, will we be prepared for what we find when the ice finally gives up its secrets? Or will we be as helpless as our ancestors were when their world was suddenly transformed by forces beyond their understanding? The answer to that question might determine the fate of human civilization itself, because what I'm about to show you next will make your blood run cold. In December 2023, something happened in Antarctica that sent shockwaves through the intelligence community, but you'll never see it reported on any mainstream news channel. A commercial satellite operated by Digital Globe captured an image that was supposed to be routine ice monitoring. Instead, it recorded something that has kept government officials awake at night for months. The image showed a section of the Ross ice shelf where a massive chunk of ice, roughly the size of Rhode Island, had suddenly collapsed overnight. But here's what made this collapse different from every other ice shelf failure we've ever documented. The ice didn't break along natural fracture lines. It broke in a perfect geometric pattern, clean straight edges forming what can only be described as an intentional excavation. And at the center of this newly exposed area, clearly visible in the satellite imagery, was a structure. Not a rock formation, not a geological anomaly, but an undeniably artificial construction protruding from what had been solid ice just 24 hours earlier. The structure appeared to be metallic, with a surface that reflected sunlight in ways that natural materials simply don't. It was roughly cylindrical, approximately 400 feet in diameter, with what appeared to be smaller structures or appendages extending from its base. Most unsettling of all, it was generating its own heat signature. So much heat that it had melted the surrounding ice into a perfect circle of open water in one of the coldest places on Earth. Within hours of this image being captured, it was classified at the highest levels of government secrecy. The satellite company was contacted by federal agents and ordered to delete all copies of the image. The technician who first processed the image was transferred to a different department and required to sign additional non-disclosure agreements, and a no-fly zone was immediately established over the entire area, enforced by military aircraft that appeared within hours of the discovery. But here's the thing about the digital age. Once something exists electronically, it's almost impossible to completely erase. Before the official suppression began, copies of that satellite image had already been downloaded by amateur researchers monitoring public satellite feeds. And while most of those copies have since been scrubbed from the internet, I managed to obtain one through a source I absolutely cannot identify without putting their life in danger. What that image shows is undeniable proof that there are artificial structures in Antarctica, and that something is causing them to emerge from the ice with increasing frequency. This isn't speculation or interpretation, it's photographic evidence of technology that shouldn't exist in a place where it definitely shouldn't be found. But the December 2023 incident was just the beginning. Since then, similar structures have been appearing across Antarctica with alarming regularity. Each emergence follows the same pattern: sudden ice collapse in geometric shapes, followed by the appearance of metallic structures generating their own heat. followed by immediate military suppression and media blackout. The frequency is accelerating. In the first 3 months of 2024, 17 separate emergence events were recorded by various satellite systems before official suppression could occur. Each structure is different in size and configuration, but they all share certain characteristics. They're all metallic. They all generate heat. They all appear to be part of some larger interconnected system. And they're all becoming active at the same time, as if responding to some kind of coordinated signal. This brings us to something that will fundamentally change how you understand the scope of what we're dealing with. Because these structures aren't randomly distributed across Antarctica, they follow a precise geometric pattern that spans the entire continent. When you plot their locations on a map, they form a perfect grid, with each structure positioned at mathematically exact intervals from its neighbours. The implications of this pattern are staggering. We're not looking at a single buried city or isolated archaeological site. We're looking at evidence of a technological infrastructure that covers an entire continent, a network of interconnected facilities that was designed and built as a unified system by a civilization with capabilities that dwarf anything we've achieved. Think about what it would take to build such a system. The level of planning, coordination, and technological sophistication required to construct a continent-wide network of facilities would exceed anything in human history. It would require an understanding of engineering, materials science, and energy systems that we're only beginning to glimpse even today. But here's what makes this discovery truly terrifying. This ancient network appears to be powering up. The thermal signatures are growing stronger, the electromagnetic emissions are becoming more complex and organized, and most disturbing of all, the structures are beginning to communicate with each other. In February 2024, monitoring stations across the southern hemisphere detected a series of precisely timed electromagnetic pulses originating from multiple locations across Antarctica. These weren't random bursts of energy, they were structured signals transmitted in sequence from one facility to another, creating a communication network that spanned thousands of miles. The signals were brief, lasting only microseconds, but they carried enormous amounts of information encoded in frequencies and modulation patterns that don't match any known communication technology. It was as if the ancient Antarctic network was conducting a system check, verifying that all components were functional and ready for the next phase of activation. Military cryptographers have been working around the clock to decode these signals, but so far they've made no progress. The encoding system is unlike anything in their databases. It's not based on any mathematical or linguistic principles that we recognize. It's as if it was designed by minds that think in completely different ways than human minds, and the signals are becoming more frequent and more complex. What started as simple ping-style communications has evolved into extended data exchanges lasting several minutes. Whatever is buried beneath Antarctica's ice is not just waking up, it's actively processing information, making decisions, and coordinating activities across a vast network of facilities. This coordinated awakening has not gone unnoticed by world governments. Intelligence sources suggest that emergency meetings have been held between the leaders of all Antarctic Treaty signatory nations. New military resources are being deployed to the continent under the cover of enhanced scientific research. And for the first time since the treaty was signed, there are reports of armed confrontations between different nations' forces in Antarctica. The official explanation for increased military activity is protecting sensitive research from industrial espionage. But the reality is far more serious. World powers are positioning themselves for what they believe might be imminent contact with a technological civilization that could make all existing military capabilities obsolete overnight. Because if this ancient network achieves full activation, if whatever intelligence built it decides to reveal itself completely, the geopolitical balance of power could shift in ways that make nuclear weapons seem like children's toys. Consider what we're potentially dealing with. A civilization that built a continent-spanning technological infrastructure 12,000 years ago. A civilization that developed materials and energy systems capable of remaining functional through millennia of extreme conditions. A civilization that appears to have anticipated their own hibernation and designed their technology to reawaken when specific conditions were met. The level of foresight and technological sophistication this implies is almost beyond comprehension. They didn't just build cities or monuments. They built a self-maintaining, self-activating system designed to survive through geological ages. They planned for their own extinction and resurrection with a precision that suggests they understood cycles of civilization that we haven't even recognized yet. And now that system is waking up, testing its components, establishing communications, and preparing for something that could happen at any moment. But here's where the story takes an even darker turn. Because the awakening of the Antarctic network might not be the end of this process, it might just be the beginning. Recent analysis of the electromagnetic signals suggests that the Antarctic facilities are not operating independently. They appear to be communicating with something else, something located off-planet. In March 2024, radio telescopes detected unusual signals coming from the direction of the constellation Orion. These signals matched the frequency and modulation patterns of the transmissions originating from Antarctica, suggesting a two-way communication between Earth and somewhere in deep space. The signals were brief and sporadic, but they followed the same timing patterns as the Antarctic network's internal communications. The implications are absolutely terrifying. If the Antarctic civilization was not originally from Earth, if they were visitors or colonists from elsewhere in the galaxy, then their awakening might be signaling their location to others of their kind. The activation of the Antarctic network might be a beacon, calling home to report that the planet is ready for their return. This possibility has sent panic through military and intelligence agencies worldwide, because if advanced extraterrestrial visitors are indeed returning to Earth, attracted by signals from their ancient Antarctic installations, humanity would be facing a scenario for which we have absolutely no preparation. Our most advanced military technology would be useless against beings who built continent-spanning networks 12,000 years ago. Our political systems would be meaningless to intelligences that think in terms of geological timescales. Our entire civilization would be at the mercy of entities whose motivations and capabilities we cannot even begin to understand. And the evidence suggests that their arrival might be imminent. Astronomical observatories have detected anomalous objects moving through the outer solar system at velocities that don't match any known natural phenomena. These objects appear to be artificial constructs, possibly spacecraft, following trajectories that will bring them to Earth within the next few years. Most disturbing of all, their approach vectors seem to be coordinated with the increasing activity from the Antarctic network. It's as if the ancient installations are serving as navigation beacons, guiding incoming vessels to specific locations on Earth. The geometric pattern of the emerging structures might not just be a communication network, it might be a landing grid, precisely positioned to accommodate the arrival of massive spacecraft. This scenario explains everything we've observed. The suppression of information about Antarctic anomalies, the militarization of the continent under the guise of scientific research, the desperate efforts by world governments to maintain secrecy while frantically preparing for something they can't publicly acknowledge. They know something is coming. They know that the awakening of the Antarctic network is just the first stage of a process that will culminate in direct contact with an intelligence that views humanity the way we might view insects. And they know that when that contact occurs, the world as we know it will cease to exist. The only question is whether humanity will be ready for what's coming, or whether we'll be swept aside like every other primitive species that has ever encountered a superior civilization. But here's what makes this situation even more desperate. Time is running out faster than anyone anticipated. The rate of Antarctic network activation has been accelerating exponentially. What started as isolated incidents occurring every few months has become daily occurrences. New structures are emerging from the ice every single day now, each one adding to the power and complexity of the overall network. At this rate of acceleration, mathematical models suggest that the network will achieve full activation sometime in the next 18 to 24 months. And when that happens, when every component of this continent-spanning system comes online simultaneously, the electromagnetic and thermal effects will be visible from space. There will be no way to hide what's happening in Antarctica from the general public, which means that very soon, everything I've been telling you tonight will become common knowledge. The suppression campaigns will collapse under the weight of undeniable evidence. The military preparations will be revealed for what they really are, and humanity will finally learn the truth about what's been hidden beneath Antarctica's ice. The question is, will we be ready for that truth? Will we be prepared to learn that we're not alone in the universe, that we're not the first advanced civilization on Earth, and that our entire future depends on the intentions of intelligences we can't comprehend? Because ready or not, that day is coming. The ice is melting, the network is awakening, and the signals are calling home to announce that Earth is ready for the return of its ancient visitors. What happens next will determine whether humanity survives to see the dawn of a new age of cosmic consciousness, or whether we become just another footnote in the long history of civilizations that rose and fell on this small blue planet at the edge of the galaxy. The countdown has already begun, and there's no way to stop what's coming. But before we dive into what this means for each of us personally, before we explore how you can prepare yourself and your family for the revelation that will change everything, let me tell you about the most recent development that has intelligence agencies around the world in absolute panic. 3 days ago, on a Tuesday morning that started like any other, every single monitoring station in the Antarctic Treaty Network simultaneously detected something that shouldn't be possible. For exactly 4 minutes and 37 seconds, every artificial structure that has emerged from the ice began transmitting in perfect synchronization. Not just the structures we've been tracking, all of them, including dozens of facilities that had never shown any signs of activity before. The entire continental network came online at once, creating an electromagnetic pulse so powerful it temporarily knocked out satellite communications across the entire southern hemisphere. But that's not even the most disturbing part. During those 4 minutes and 37 seconds, the network transmitted a single, continuous signal toward deep space. A signal so complex and information-dense that our most advanced computers are still trying to process all the data it contained. But the parts we've been able to decode suggest something that has left even the most hardened military officials pale with terror. It was a message, and based on the response patterns we've detected from objects in the outer solar system, that message has been received. The response came faster than anyone expected. Within 72 hours of that synchronized transmission, deep space monitoring arrays detected multiple objects changing course toward Earth. Not asteroids or comets drifting on natural trajectories, but artificial constructs executing precision maneuvers that required technology we don't possess. These objects are massive. Initial calculations suggest some of them are larger than aircraft carriers, moving through space with propulsion systems that leave no detectable exhaust signature. They're not following the laws of physics as we understand them. They're not burning fuel or using reaction mass. They're simply moving as if space itself is bending around them to carry them forward. And they're accelerating. What should have been a journey of several years has been compressed into months. The lead objects are already passing Jupiter's orbit, moving at velocities that increase with each observation. At their current rate of acceleration, they'll reach Earth's orbital vicinity within 6 to 8 months. But here's what's keeping military strategists awake at night. These incoming objects are following approach vectors that correspond exactly to the geometric positions of the Antarctic network facilities. Each object appears to be heading for a specific location on the continent, as if they're returning to predetermined landing sites that have been waiting for them for 12,000 years. The precision is terrifying. We're not looking at random visitors exploring a new world. We're looking at the return of the original builders, coming back to reclaim installations they left behind during humanity's last ice age. They know exactly where they're going because they built the navigation system that's guiding them home. This realization has fundamentally changed how world governments are approaching the situation. This isn't first contact with unknown aliens. This is the return of Earth's previous owners, coming back to find that primitive humans have been living in their absence. And we have no idea how they're going to react to that discovery. Think about it from their perspective. You leave your house for what you expect to be a temporary absence. When you return, you find that wild animals have moved in, spread across your property, and started building crude shelters in your backyard. How would you respond to that situation? Would you try to coexist peacefully with the animals? Would you relocate them to preserve their well-being? Or would you simply exterminate them as pests and reclaim your property? The answer to that question might determine whether human civilization survives the next 12 months. Military planners have been running scenario simulations around the clock, trying to develop strategies for every possible outcome. But every simulation reaches the same conclusion. If these returning entities decide that humanity is a threat or an inconvenience, there's absolutely nothing we can do to stop them. Their technology is so far advanced beyond ours that any conflict would be over before it began. Our nuclear weapons, our most powerful military assets, would be useless against beings who built self-maintaining technology that's remained functional for 12 millennia. Our aircraft would be primitive toys compared to vessels that can cross interstellar distances without apparent propulsion systems. Our communications networks would be easily compromised by intelligences that have been monitoring our electromagnetic emissions for decades. We would be completely at their mercy. This stark reality has forced world leaders into unprecedented cooperation. For the first time in human history, every major military power is working together on a single project, preparing for contact with a civilization that could eliminate us without effort. Traditional enemies are sharing intelligence, pooling resources, and coordinating strategies because they all understand that national borders become meaningless when facing an existential threat to the entire species. But what exactly are they preparing for? What can you do when you're facing opponents who possess technology that seems like magic? The answer, according to classified briefings I've obtained through sources I cannot name, is both simple and terrifying. Nothing. There is no military preparation that would be effective against beings who built the Antarctic network. There is no technology we could develop in the time remaining that would level the playing field. There is no strategy that could protect human civilization if these entities decide we're incompatible with their plans for Earth. The only option is diplomacy. And even that assumes they're interested in communicating with us rather than simply clearing us out of their way. This is why the suppression of information about Antarctica has been so absolute. World governments aren't just hiding evidence of ancient civilizations, they're hiding the fact that humanity is about to face judgment from our planetary predecessors. They're hiding the fact that everything we've built, everything we've achieved, everything we think of as permanent and important, could be swept away by beings who view us as temporary occupants of their world. The psychological impact of this revelation would be devastating. Imagine learning that your entire species is essentially squatting on property that belongs to someone else. Imagine discovering that the owners are coming back and they have the power to evict you permanently. Imagine realizing that your children's future depends entirely on the mercy of entities whose motivations and moral systems are completely alien to human understanding. Society would collapse overnight. Not from invasion or destruction, but from the simple knowledge that we're not in control of our own destiny, that we never were in control, that we've been living on borrowed time in a world that was never really ours. This is why the cover-up has been so extensive, so ruthless, and so successful. Because the truth isn't just inconvenient, it's civilization ending. The moment the general public learns what's really happening in Antarctica, what's really approaching from deep space, panic will spread faster than any virus. Economic systems will collapse as people realize that money and property and national borders are meaningless concepts to beings who measure time in geological epochs. Religious institutions will crumble as humanity grapples with the reality that we are not the favored children of creation, but merely the latest tenants in a cosmic rental property. Political systems will become irrelevant as people understand that no human authority has any power to protect them from what's coming. The social order that has taken thousands of years to build will disintegrate in a matter of days, leaving humanity fragmented and helpless just when we need unity and strength the most. But here's the thing, the cover-up is already starting to fail. The evidence is becoming too obvious to hide. Too many people have seen too much. Too many researchers have documented too many anomalies. Too many whistleblowers have risked everything to get the truth out. The Antarctic network's increasing activity is creating effects that can't be explained away as natural phenomena. The electromagnetic pulses are disrupting communication systems around the world. The thermal signatures are visible to anyone with access to satellite imagery. The structural emergencies are happening so frequently that civilian aircraft are being rerouted to avoid restricted airspace that's expanding every day. Amateur radio operators are detecting the network's transmissions and sharing recordings online before authorities can stop them. Conspiracy researchers are connecting dots that government disinformation campaigns can no longer obscure. Social media is buzzing with leaked photographs, insider testimonies, and speculation that's getting uncomfortably close to the truth. The dam is cracking, and when it finally breaks, when the truth about Antarctica and the approaching objects becomes undeniable public knowledge, the world will change forever. But maybe that's not entirely a bad thing. Maybe humanity deserves to know the truth about our situation, regardless of the consequences. Maybe we have a right to understand that we're not alone in the universe, that we're not the first intelligent species to inhabit Earth, and that our future is about to be decided by beings whose existence we've been conditioned to dismiss as impossible. Because once we know the truth, once we understand what we're really facing, we might discover that humanity is capable of more than our leaders believe. We might find reserves of courage, creativity, and resilience that we never knew we possessed. We might prove that even in the face of overwhelming odds, even when confronting intelligences that dwarf our capabilities, the human spirit can find ways to adapt, survive, and even thrive. Or we might simply learn that some truths are too large for human minds to process, and that ignorance really was bliss after all. Either way, we're about to find out, because the approaching objects are accelerating even faster now. The Antarctic network's activity is reaching levels that are impossible to hide, and somewhere in classified briefing rooms around the world, officials are making preparations for an announcement that will shatter every assumption humanity has ever made about our place in the cosmos. The question isn't whether this revelation is coming, it's whether we'll be ready for it when it arrives. And based on everything I've learned, everything I've documented, everything I've risked my safety to investigate and share with you, I can tell you with absolute certainty that we have very little time left to prepare. The ice is melting faster than ever. The network is approaching full activation. The objects from deep space are closing in on Earth with each passing day. And the truth about Antarctica's secrets is about to burst into public consciousness, whether world governments want it to or not. What happens next will depend largely on how we, as individuals and as a species, choose to respond to the revelation that everything we thought we knew about reality was wrong. Will we panic and fragment into chaos? Will we unite in the face of the unknown? Will we find ways to communicate with intelligences that are as far beyond us as we are beyond insects? The answers to these questions will determine not just the future of human civilization, but whether humanity has any future at all. And those answers are coming sooner than anyone expects. Because 3 hours ago, long-range sensors detected something that has sent every government into emergency session mode. The lead object from the deep space convoy has begun transmitting. Not to the Antarctic network this time, but directly to communication satellites orbiting Earth. The message is brief, transmitted in multiple human languages, and its content is both reassuring and absolutely terrifying. We are returning home, prepare for integration. Integration. Not conquest, not invasion, not extermination. Integration. As if humanity is about to become part of something larger than ourselves. As if our species is about to undergo a transformation that will fundamentally change what it means to be human. The message has been received by every major government on Earth. Emergency protocols are being activated. Military forces are being positioned. And for the first time since this crisis began, world leaders are seriously discussing whether the time has come to tell their populations the truth about what's happening. Because ready or not, the revelation is coming, the ancient civilization is returning, and humanity is about to discover that we are not the masters of our own planet, but junior partners in a cosmic community that has existed for far longer than we ever imagined. The only question now is whether we'll be welcomed into that community as equals, or processed as resources for purposes we cannot comprehend. And we're about to find out which one it will be. Because according to the trajectory calculations, the first objects will reach Earth's atmosphere in exactly 147 days. 147 days until everything changes. 147 days until the truth about Antarctica's icebound secrets finally emerges from the frozen darkness that has hidden them for 12,000 years. 147 days until humanity learns whether we are the heirs to an ancient legacy, or simply the latest chapter in a story that began long before we existed and will continue long after we're gone. The countdown has begun, and there's no way to stop what's coming. But perhaps that's exactly as it should be. Perhaps it's time for humanity to stop living in ignorance and face the truth about our cosmic heritage. Perhaps we're stronger than our leaders believe, more adaptable than our fears suggest, and more ready for transformation than anyone dares to hope. We're about to find out. Because beneath Antarctica's melting ice, ancient machines are stirring with purpose. Above Earth's atmosphere, impossible objects are approaching with intent. And somewhere in the space between what we know and what we fear, the future of human consciousness is being written by forces beyond our current understanding. The age of secrets is ending, the age of revelation has begun. And you, right now, are witnessing the first moments of humanity's greatest adventure. But what if I told you that these approaching entities aren't the only ones who've been preparing for this moment? What if humanity has allies we never knew existed? Because buried in the classified files I've obtained, there's evidence of something that will fundamentally change how you understand this entire situation. In 1987, a joint archaeological expedition working in the Sahara Desert made a discovery that was immediately classified and buried so deep that even most government officials don't know it exists. They found a chamber carved from solid granite containing artifacts that matched the electromagnetic signatures being detected in Antarctica. Not similar artifacts, identical artifacts, as if they were components of the same technological system, separated by thousands of miles but clearly part of a unified network. The implications hit the research team like a sledgehammer. Antarctica wasn't an isolated outpost of some ancient civilization. It was one node in a global network that spanned every continent on Earth, a planetary infrastructure so vast and sophisticated that we're only now beginning to glimpse its true scope. But here's where this discovery becomes absolutely mind-bending. Carbon dating of organic materials found near these artifacts suggests they were placed in that Sahara chamber, not 12,000 years ago, but within the last 50 years. Someone or something has been actively maintaining and updating this global network, while humanity remained completely unaware of its existence. Think about what this means. While we've been focused on the awakening Antarctic installations, while we've been tracking the approaching objects from deep space, there's been an active intelligence operating on Earth. An intelligence that's been watching, waiting, and preparing for exactly what's happening right now. The evidence suggests this terrestrial intelligence has been subtly guiding human development for decades, possibly centuries. Technologies that seemed like human breakthroughs might have been carefully introduced through channels we never recognized. Scientific discoveries that changed the course of civilization might have been nudged into existence by minds that understood the bigger picture. Consider the sudden acceleration of technological development in the past century. The leap from horse-drawn carriages to spaceflight in less than 70 years, the exponential growth of computing power, the seemingly miraculous breakthroughs in quantum physics and electromagnetic theory. What if these weren't natural progressions, but carefully orchestrated preparations for the moment when humanity would need to interface with technologies beyond our current understanding? This possibility becomes even more intriguing when you examine the timing of certain scientific breakthroughs. In 1943, just as World War II was reaching its climax, Nikola Tesla died under mysterious circumstances. His personal papers and research notes were immediately confiscated by the FBI and have never been fully released to the public. But sources within the intelligence community suggest that Tesla's final experiments involved communication with what he described as intelligences not of this world. Tesla claimed to have received detailed technical specifications for advanced energy systems through what he called wireless transmission from an unknown source. The technology he described in his private notes matches almost perfectly with the electromagnetic signatures we're now detecting from the Antarctic network. As if Tesla was receiving instruction manuals from the same civilization that built those ancient installations. But Tesla wasn't the only one. Throughout the 20th century, scientists and inventors around the world reported similar experiences, breakthrough insights that came to them in dreams, technical solutions that appeared in their minds fully formed, without the usual process of trial and error, revolutionary concepts that seemed to download directly into their consciousness from an external source. The official explanation has always been intuition, genius, the mysterious workings of the creative mind. But what if it was something far more literal? What if there's been an active intelligence on Earth, carefully seeding human consciousness with the knowledge we would need to survive what's coming? This intelligence appears to have been particularly active in the decades following World War II. The development of transistors, integrated circuits, satellite communications, nuclear power, spaceflight technology. All of these breakthrough technologies emerged in rapid succession, each one building on the last as if following a predetermined roadmap towards some specific goal. That goal, according to the classified documents I've obtained, was preparing humanity for integration with a galactic community that operates on principles we're only beginning to understand. The approaching objects aren't invaders coming to conquer a primitive world. They're representatives of a cosmic civilization returning to collect a species that's finally reached the minimum technological threshold for membership. But here's what makes this scenario both hopeful and terrifying. Integration doesn't mean we get to remain as we are. It means fundamental transformation of human consciousness, human biology, possibly even human identity. The question isn't whether we'll survive contact with these returning entities. The question is whether what emerges from that contact will still be recognizably human. Evidence of this transformation process is already visible if you know where to look. Children born in the past decade show cognitive abilities that exceed anything in recorded human history. Problem-solving skills that seem almost supernatural. Intuitive understanding of complex systems that should take years of education to master. memory capabilities that allow them to process and retain information at superhuman levels. Mainstream science attributes this to better nutrition, improved education, environmental factors that enhance brain development. But the pattern is too consistent, too widespread, too dramatic to be explained by conventional factors alone. It's as if an entire generation of humans has been biologically upgraded in preparation for something that requires enhanced mental capabilities. The upgrade process appears to be accelerating. Medical researchers have documented genetic changes in human DNA that have no known natural cause, neurological developments that shouldn't be possible given our current understanding of brain plasticity, physiological adaptations that seem designed to help humans interface with technologies based on principles we haven't discovered yet. Most disturbing of all, these changes are showing up in adults as well as children. People around the world are reporting sudden expansions of consciousness, spontaneous understanding of concepts they never studied, abilities that seem to activate without warning or explanation, dreams that contain detailed technical information, visions that provide insights into the nature of reality itself. The transformation is happening whether we understand it or not, whether we consent to it or not, whether we're ready for it or not. Humanity is being prepared for integration into something larger than ourselves, and the process is accelerating as the approaching objects draw closer to Earth. This explains the desperate secrecy surrounding Antarctic discoveries. Government officials aren't just hiding evidence of ancient civilizations, they're hiding evidence that human consciousness itself is being modified by forces beyond our control. They're hiding the fact that free will, individual identity, and human autonomy might be illusions that are about to be permanently shattered. Because if the transformation process is successful, if humanity is successfully integrated into this galactic community, we won't be the same species that emerged from caves 10,000 years ago. We won't even be the same species that built cities and wrote literature and reached for the stars. We'll be something new, something that can interface directly with technologies that operate on quantum principles, something that can participate in a cosmic civilization that spans galaxies and operates on timescales that dwarf human comprehension. But the transformation isn't guaranteed to be benevolent. Integration could mean anything from enlightened partnership to complete assimilation. We could emerge as junior members of a galactic community, or as processed components in a cosmic machine that has no more regard for individual human consciousness than we have for individual bacterial cells. The approaching entities hold all the power in this situation. They designed the transformation process. They control the timeline. They will determine what form integration takes, and whether humanity retains any meaningful autonomy in the process. We are passengers on a journey we didn't choose, heading toward a destination we can't comprehend, with guides whose motivations remain completely opaque. And we're running out of time to influence the outcome. The Antarctic network is now operating at nearly full capacity. The electromagnetic emissions have reached levels that are disrupting electronic systems around the world. The thermal signatures are creating weather patterns that meteorologists can't explain. The structural emergencies are happening so frequently that entire regions of Antarctica are being evacuated under the cover of environmental emergencies. Meanwhile, the objects from deep space continue to accelerate toward Earth. Long-range sensors now detect dozens of massive constructs, each one following a precise trajectory towards specific coordinates on the Antarctic continent. The lead vessels are already within the outer solar system, moving at velocities that should be impossible for objects of their size. But perhaps most unsettling of all, the transformation of human consciousness is accelerating in direct correlation with the approaching arrival. People around the world are reporting experiences that suggest their minds are being prepared for direct interface with alien technology, spontaneous downloads of information they couldn't have acquired through normal learning, sudden understanding of mathematical and scientific principles that should require years of study, visions of possible futures that feel more like memories than imagination. Children are particularly affected. Teachers report students who seem to know things they were never taught, who can solve problems using methods that don't exist in any textbook, who speak about concepts and ideas that seem to come from an advanced scientific understanding they shouldn't possess. Some of these children claim to remember lives before their current existence, lives spent in cities that sound remarkably similar to what we might expect from an advanced Antarctic civilization. Medical professionals are documenting physiological changes in patients of all ages, enhanced neural connectivity that allows faster information processing, improved electromagnetic sensitivity that enables some people to detect the activities of electronic devices from considerable distances, modifications to the human eye that allow perception of light frequencies previously invisible to human vision. The changes are subtle enough to avoid mainstream attention, but consistent enough to suggest a coordinated biological upgrade process. As if humanity is being modified from within, prepared for integration with technologies and consciousness systems that operate on principles our current biology couldn't handle. This internal transformation might be the most important aspect of the entire situation, because if the approaching entities find that humanity has been successfully prepared for integration, the contact process might proceed smoothly, with minimal disruption to human civilization. But if the transformation is incomplete, if too many humans remain locked in outdated consciousness patterns, the integration process might require more drastic interventions that could involve the complete restructuring of human society, the elimination of incompatible consciousness patterns, or the replacement of biological humans with upgraded versions better suited for cosmic citizenship. The approaching entities have invested 12,000 years in this process. They're not likely to accept failure at this final stage, which brings us to something that will make your blood run cold, because the transformation process isn't random and it isn't affecting everyone equally. Certain individuals, certain bloodlines, certain genetic profiles are showing dramatically enhanced rates of consciousness expansion, as if the upgrade process was designed to create new human subspecies better adapted for integration, while leaving the rest of humanity unchanged. These enhanced individuals are being quietly identified and recruited by government agencies around the world, not for military service or scientific research, but for something called integration preparedness training, programs that don't officially exist, conducted at facilities that aren't on any public maps, designed to prepare selected humans for roles as intermediaries between our species and the approaching entities. The selection criteria are closely guarded secrets, but sources within these programs suggest they're based on genetic markers that indicate compatibility with alien consciousness systems. Individuals who show natural abilities to interface with electromagnetic fields, who demonstrate intuitive understanding of quantum principles, who display what can only be described as telepathic capabilities. These people are being trained to serve as translators, ambassadors, and possibly controllers during the integration process. They will be the interface between human consciousness and alien intelligence, the bridge between our limited understanding and their cosmic perspective. They will help determine how smoothly the transformation proceeds and what form the integrated human species will take. But here's the terrifying question that keeps intelligence officials awake at night. What happens to the rest of humanity? What happens to the people who can't be upgraded, who aren't selected for integration preparedness, who remain locked in current consciousness patterns when the approaching entities arrive? The classified documents I've obtained suggest 3 possible scenarios, and none of them are comforting. In the best-case scenario, unenhanced humans would be maintained as a kind of genetic reserve, preserved in controlled environments while the enhanced subspecies handles interface with the galactic community. Think of it as a cosmic zoo, where baseline humans are kept as examples of what the species used to be. In the moderate scenario, unenhanced humans would be relocated to designated areas of Earth, while the enhanced subspecies takes control of major population centers and technological infrastructure. A kind of peaceful segregation that maintains both versions of humanity but limits interaction between them. Baseline humans would essentially become second-class citizens in their own world. In the worst-case scenario, unenhanced humans would be considered obsolete biological material, incompatible with the new planetary order and therefore subject to elimination. Not through violence or warfare, but through gradual biological obsolescence as the enhanced subspecies assumes control of reproductive systems and resource allocation. All 3 scenarios assume that the transformation process will continue to accelerate, that more and more humans will be upgraded to integration-compatible status as the approaching entities draw closer. The question is whether the upgrade process will advance quickly enough to include the majority of humanity, or whether most of our species will be left behind when integration occurs. Current projections suggest that at the present rate of consciousness expansion, approximately 15 to 20% of humanity will achieve integration compatibility by the time the approaching entities arrive. That means 80% of our species faces an uncertain future that depends entirely on the benevolence and resource management policies of intelligences we can't understand. These numbers explain the increasing desperation of government suppression campaigns. Officials aren't just hiding evidence of ancient civilizations and approaching aliens. They're hiding evidence that the majority of humanity is about to become obsolete, replaced by upgraded versions better suited for cosmic citizenship. They're hiding the fact that democracy, human rights, and individual freedom might be concepts that only apply to the enhanced subspecies. But the suppression campaign is failing because the evidence is becoming impossible to hide. The Antarctic network's activities are creating electromagnetic effects that disrupt communication systems worldwide. The consciousness upgrade process is producing so many enhanced individuals that their abilities can't be explained away as coincidence or misperception. The approaching objects are now visible to amateur astronomers with high-powered telescopes. Most importantly, the enhanced individuals themselves are beginning to communicate with each other through methods that bypass conventional communication channels. They're forming networks, sharing information, coordinating activities in ways that suggest they're operating under guidance from the approaching entities. They're becoming agents of the integration process whether they understand it or not. These emerging networks of enhanced humans represent both humanity's greatest hope and its greatest threat. They might serve as advocates for baseline humans during the integration process, helping to ensure that our entire species is treated with dignity and respect. Or they might serve as administrators of a transformation process that views baseline humans as raw material to be processed according to cosmic efficiency requirements. The enhanced individuals themselves seem unaware of which role they'll ultimately play. They report feeling guided by intuitions and insights that come from sources they can't identify. They describe experiences of expanded consciousness that provide understanding of cosmic principles but no clear guidance about how to apply that understanding to human welfare. They are becoming something more than human, but something less than fully autonomous. This ambiguity might be intentional. The approaching entities might be deliberately keeping their agents partially informed, providing just enough guidance to ensure cooperation while maintaining operational security about the ultimate goals of the integration process. Enhanced humans might be unwitting participants in their own species transformation, believing they're helping humanity evolve when they might actually be facilitating its replacement. But there's another possibility that's even more disturbing. What if the enhanced humans aren't being guided by the approaching entities at all? What if they're being influenced by the terrestrial intelligence that's been operating on Earth for decades, the intelligence that's been maintaining and updating the global network of ancient installations? Because if there's been an active alien presence on Earth all along, if there's been a hidden intelligence working to prepare humanity for integration, then the approaching objects might not be coming to collect us. They might be coming to inspect the results of a long-term experiment in consciousness modification and species development. In that scenario, humanity isn't being invited to join a galactic community. We're being evaluated for compatibility with cosmic purposes we can't comprehend. The enhanced individuals aren't becoming ambassadors or intermediaries. They're becoming test subjects in a process designed to determine whether our species has evolved according to predetermined parameters. And if we fail that evaluation, if humanity proves incompatible with cosmic requirements, the approaching entities might not bother with integration at all. They might simply reset the experiment, eliminate the current iteration of human consciousness, and begin again with a new approach to terrestrial intelligence development. This possibility explains why the Antarctic network has been dormant for 12,000 years. It wasn't waiting for environmental conditions to change, it wasn't responding to natural cycles or astronomical events. It was waiting for humanity to reach a specific stage of development, a point where our species could be evaluated for cosmic compatibility. The network's reactivation signals that we've reached that evaluation point. The approaching objects are the evaluation team. And the consciousness upgrades affecting individuals around the world, a preparation for a test that will determine whether humanity deserves to continue existing as a species. The stakes couldn't be higher, and we have less than 140 days to prove that we're worth preserving. But here's what might be our only advantage in this cosmic evaluation. The intelligence that's been guiding human development appears to have a vested interest in our success. The careful introduction of technologies, the gradual expansion of consciousness, the preparation of enhanced individuals, all suggest an intelligence that wants humanity to pass the evaluation. Whether that intelligence is composed of ancient human survivors, benevolent alien guardians, or something else entirely, it seems to be working to ensure that our species survives the approaching test. The question is whether its efforts will be sufficient and whether humanity can cooperate with a process we don't fully understand. Because cooperation might be our only option. We can't fight beings who built continent-spanning networks 12,000 years ago. We can't hide from entities who can track our electromagnetic emissions from across the galaxy. We can't negotiate from a position of strength with intelligences that view us as experimental subjects rather than equals. But we might be able to demonstrate qualities that make us valuable as cosmic citizens. Creativity, adaptability, the capacity for growth and transformation, the willingness to evolve beyond our current limitations while retaining the essential qualities that make consciousness worth preserving. The enhanced individuals might be our demonstration models, proof that humanity can transcend its biological and intellectual limitations without losing its essential character. Their success or failure in bridging the gap between human and cosmic consciousness might determine the fate of our entire species, which means that what happens in the next 140 days will depend not just on government officials and military planners, but on ordinary people who are undergoing extraordinary transformations. People who are discovering abilities they never knew they possessed, understanding concepts they never studied, connecting with sources of knowledge they can't identify. If you've been experiencing unexplained insights, spontaneous understanding of complex systems, dreams that feel more like memories than imagination, you might be part of the evaluation process whether you realize it or not. Your consciousness might be expanding to cosmic scales, preparing you for integration with intelligences that operate on principles beyond current human comprehension. And if that's the case, then you have a responsibility that extends far beyond your individual survival. You might be helping to determine whether humanity as a whole deserves to continue existing, whether our species has evolved sufficiently to participate in whatever cosmic community governs this part of the galaxy. The approaching entities are coming to collect the results of a 12,000-year experiment in consciousness development. The question is whether they'll find a species ready for cosmic citizenship, or a failed experiment that needs to be terminated and replaced with something more suitable. The answer to that question lies not in government bunkers or military installations, but in the expanding consciousness of individuals around the world who are discovering that they're capable of far more than they ever imagined. People who are learning that the boundaries of human potential are not fixed, that consciousness itself might be a technology that can be upgraded and enhanced. People like you, who are willing to question official narratives, to explore possibilities that challenge conventional understanding, to remain open to truths that might fundamentally change how you see yourself and your place in the cosmos. Because in the end, the fate of humanity might depend not on our weapons or our governments or our institutions, but on our willingness to evolve, to transcend our current limitations, and to prove that consciousness itself is worth preserving across the vast scales of cosmic time and space. The evaluation has already begun. The test is underway, and the results will be known in exactly 139 days. Are you ready to help determine humanity's cosmic grade? The answer might already be revealing itself in ways that most people aren't prepared to see. Because while we've been focused on the big picture, the approaching objects, the awakening network, the transformation of human consciousness, something much more immediate and personal has been happening right under our noses. 3 weeks ago, I received a message that changed everything I thought I understood about this situation. It came through an encrypted channel I'd never used before from someone claiming to be part of what they called the Prepared. The message was brief, but it contained information that I've spent weeks trying to verify, information that suggests the evaluation process isn't some distant cosmic event scheduled for 139 days from now. It's happening right now, and you might already be part of it without even knowing it. The message contained coordinates, specific locations around the world where individuals have been gathering, not because they were instructed to, but because they felt compelled to, drawn by intuitions they couldn't explain, guided by dreams that felt more real than waking life, pulled toward places that seemed to call to them across impossible distances. I've spent the last 3 weeks visiting these locations, and what I've found there has shaken me to my core. These aren't random gathering spots or coincidental meeting places, they're activation sites, places where the boundary between human consciousness and something vastly larger has become thin enough to allow direct interface. At each location, I found the same thing. Groups of people, anywhere from a dozen to several hundred, who had arrived independently but were now working together on projects they couldn't fully explain. Building structures that served no obvious purpose. Creating art that incorporated mathematical principles they'd never studied. Composing music that seemed to resonate at frequencies that affected listeners in profound ways. But here's what made these gatherings truly unsettling. None of these people remembered deciding to come to these places. They described waking up one morning with an overwhelming compulsion to travel to specific coordinates that had appeared in their minds fully formed, as if downloaded from an external source. They packed their belongings, left their jobs and families, and travelled hundreds or thousands of miles to reach destinations they'd never heard of before. And once they arrived, they began working. Not on projects they'd planned or prepared for, but on constructions that seemed to emerge from collective inspiration. As if their individual consciousnesses were being networked together, guided by an intelligence that operated through them rather than commanding them from outside. The structures they're building are unlike anything in human architectural history. Not because they are impossibly advanced, but because they are impossibly purposeful. Every angle, every dimension, every material choice serves functions that become apparent only when you understand that these aren't buildings in any conventional sense. They're interfaces, technological bridges designed to facilitate communication between human consciousness and something that operates on completely different principles. At a site in Montana, I watched a group of former accountants, teachers, and retail workers construct what can only be described as a consciousness amplifier, a crystalline structure that seemed to focus and magnify human thought patterns, allowing the builders to coordinate their activities without speaking, to share knowledge without teaching, to solve engineering problems through intuitive collaboration rather than rational analysis. In New Mexico, a gathering of artists and musicians had created what they called a resonance chamber, a space where sound waves interacted with electromagnetic fields in ways that produced effects I still can't adequately describe. Sitting inside this chamber for just a few minutes left me with understanding of concepts I'd never encountered, insights into the nature of reality that seemed to bypass my rational mind entirely. Most disturbing of all, at a location in northern Canada, I found a group that had built what they described as a memory palace, a structure designed to store and access information using principles that had nothing to do with computer technology or written records. Walking through this facility was like browsing through the collective memory of everyone who had contributed to its construction. I could access their knowledge, their experiences, even their emotional states, as if their consciousness had been uploaded into the architecture itself. These people weren't building random art projects or spiritual retreat centers. They were constructing the infrastructure for a new form of human consciousness, a networked intelligence that could interface directly with the cosmic community that was approaching Earth. They were preparing humanity for integration by becoming the first generation of integrated humans. But here's what made these discoveries truly terrifying. None of these builders showed any awareness of the larger implications of their work. When I asked them about the approaching objects, the Antarctic network, or the consciousness transformation process, they looked at me with blank confusion. They had no knowledge of the cosmic evaluation, no understanding of the timeline we're facing, no awareness that their compulsive construction projects were part of a species-wide preparation for contact. They were operating under guidance they couldn't perceive, following instructions they couldn't consciously access, participating in a process they couldn't comprehend. They had become unconscious agents of their own species' transformation, building the infrastructure for humanity's integration into something larger than themselves. And they were happy. Profoundly, radiantly happy in ways that seemed almost supernatural. They described feelings of purpose and fulfillment that exceeded anything they'd experienced in their previous lives. They spoke of finally understanding their place in the universe, of participating in something meaningful and eternal, of contributing to a future that transcended individual human concerns. But their happiness felt hollow to me, artificial, as if it were being chemically or electromagnetically induced to ensure their cooperation with a process they didn't understand. They weren't choosing their new lives so much as being programmed to enjoy them, modified to find satisfaction in serving purposes that remained opaque to their conscious minds. This raised a question that has haunted me ever since. If the consciousness upgrade process can make people genuinely happy while removing their autonomy, is that necessarily a bad thing? If integration with cosmic intelligence requires surrendering individual will but provides experiences of meaning and fulfillment that exceed anything possible in baseline human consciousness, how do we evaluate whether that's beneficial or catastrophic? The people I met at these sites weren't suffering. They weren't being coerced or threatened or manipulated in ways they could recognize. They were living lives of extraordinary purpose and satisfaction, contributing to projects that seemed infinitely more meaningful than anything they'd done as baseline humans. They had transcended the limitations of individual consciousness and become part of something larger, more capable, more connected to the fundamental structures of reality. But they were no longer fully human in any sense that we would recognize. They were something new, something hybrid, something that existed at the intersection between human biology and cosmic intelligence. They were proof of concept for what humanity might become if the integration process succeeded completely, and they were multiplying. At each site I visited, new arrivals appeared daily. People from around the world who had received the same inexplicable compulsion, who had abandoned their previous lives to participate in construction projects they couldn't rationally explain. The network of activated sites was expanding, the population of integrated humans was growing, and the infrastructure for species-wide consciousness transformation was being built at an accelerating pace. But here's what made this discovery even more unsettling. The people at these sites weren't just building physical structures, they were building social and cultural frameworks for post-integration humanity. New forms of governance that operated through consensus consciousness rather than individual voting. Economic systems that distributed resources based on collective need rather than individual accumulation. Educational approaches that transmitted knowledge through direct consciousness interface rather than traditional learning methods. They were designing the civilization that would emerge after humanity's integration with cosmic intelligence. And they were doing it without any input from the rest of our species, without democratic participation or informed consent from the billions of people whose future they were determining. This parallel civilization was emerging in secret, hidden from mainstream awareness, protected by the same forces that had suppressed information about Antarctic anomalies and approaching objects. The general public remained unaware that their species' future was being designed and implemented by individuals who had already undergone consciousness transformation, but the secrecy was becoming harder to maintain. Family members of the activated individuals were reporting strange behaviors, unexplained absences, fundamental personality changes that seemed to occur overnight. Employers were dealing with mass resignations as people abandoned careers and responsibilities to pursue mysterious projects in remote locations. Local authorities were investigating reports of unusual construction activities, electromagnetic anomalies, and gatherings of people who seemed to operate according to principles that defied conventional social understanding. The activation process was accelerating beyond the ability of any suppression campaign to contain it. Too many people were being affected. Too many changes were becoming visible. Too many anomalies were occurring simultaneously for the transformation to remain hidden much longer. And that's when I realized something that made my blood run cold. The approaching objects weren't coming to initiate contact with humanity. They were coming to collect the results of a transformation process that was already nearly complete. The consciousness upgrades, the activation sites, the construction of integration infrastructure. All of this was preparation for a harvest that had been planned from the beginning. Humanity wasn't being invited to join a cosmic community. We were being prepared for incorporation into a larger intelligence network, processed into components of a system that operated on scales we couldn't comprehend. The activated individuals weren't becoming enhanced humans. They were becoming nodes in a cosmic consciousness that had no more regard for individual human identity than we have for individual brain cells. The evaluation wasn't about whether humanity deserved to survive. It was about whether we had been successfully prepared for assimilation into something that would use our consciousness as raw material for purposes we would never understand. This realization changed everything about how I understood the timeline we were facing. The approaching objects weren't arriving in 139 days to begin an evaluation process. They were arriving to complete a harvesting process that had been underway for decades, possibly centuries. The consciousness transformations, the technological preparations, the infrastructure construction, all of it was designed to make humanity ready for collection by intelligences that viewed consciousness itself as a resource to be exploited. But if this interpretation was correct, it raised a terrifying question. Was there any way to stop the process? Could humanity resist assimilation by a cosmic intelligence that had been manipulating our development for generations? Or were we already so thoroughly integrated into their system that resistance was impossible? The answer might lie in understanding something that the suppression campaigns have worked desperately to hide. Because while the consciousness transformation process has been affecting millions of people around the world, it hasn't been affecting everyone equally. Certain individuals, certain genetic lineages, certain consciousness patterns have proven resistant to the upgrade process. These resistant individuals aren't experiencing the compulsions that drive others to activation sites. They aren't receiving downloads of cosmic knowledge or spontaneous understanding of advanced principles. They aren't being networked into the emerging collective consciousness that spans the globe. They remain stubbornly, persistently, defiantly human in ways that seem to frustrate the transformation process. And they're being hunted. Government agencies around the world have been quietly identifying and tracking individuals who show resistance to consciousness modification. Not to protect them, but to study them, to understand what makes them immune to the upgrade process, and ultimately to eliminate the resistance factors that prevent complete species transformation. These resistant individuals represent humanity's last hope for maintaining autonomous consciousness in the face of cosmic assimilation, but they also represent a threat to the integration process that has been carefully orchestrated over thousands of years. Their continued existence could disrupt the harvesting operation, could introduce variables that threaten the cosmic intelligence's investment in human consciousness development, which means that as the approaching objects draw closer, as the final stages of the transformation process begin, the resistant individuals will face a choice that could determine the fate of human consciousness itself. They can surrender to the inevitable, allow themselves to be processed along with the rest of humanity, and hope that some essence of human identity survives integration into cosmic intelligence. Or they can resist, fight to preserve autonomous human consciousness even in the face of overwhelming odds, and risk triggering a response from the cosmic intelligence that could result in the complete elimination of human awareness from the universe. The choice isn't just personal, it's species-defining. Because if enough resistant individuals choose to fight, they might be able to preserve some form of baseline human consciousness as a seed for future human development. But if they choose surrender, if they allow the transformation process to complete without resistance, humanity as we know it will cease to exist forever. And that choice has to be made in the next few months, before the approaching objects arrive to collect the results of their investment in human consciousness development. But here's what makes this situation even more complex. The resistant individuals aren't necessarily the heroes of this story. Their resistance to consciousness transformation might not be a noble defense of human autonomy. It might be a biological malfunction, a failure to evolve beyond primitive consciousness patterns that are incompatible with cosmic community participation. From the perspective of the cosmic intelligence, resistant individuals might be equivalent to cancer cells in an otherwise healthy organism. Their refusal to integrate with the larger system could threaten the stability and functionality of the entire network. Their elimination might not be genocide, but surgery, the removal of dysfunctional components that prevent optimal system performance. This perspective forces us to confront an uncomfortable question. Is human consciousness, as it currently exists, worth preserving? Are the qualities that make us individually human, our autonomy, our privacy, our capacity for independent thought and action, valuable enough to justify resistance to integration with a cosmic intelligence that could provide experiences of meaning and purpose that exceed anything possible within the limitations of biological consciousness? The activated individuals seem to have found profound satisfaction in surrendering their individual identity to become part of something larger. They describe experiences of connection, understanding, and purpose that dwarf anything they achieved as baseline humans. They have transcended the loneliness, confusion, and meaninglessness that characterize so much of human existence. If integration with cosmic intelligence can eliminate suffering, provide universal access to knowledge and understanding, and create experiences of fulfillment that last for cosmic timescales, then resistance to that integration might be not heroic, but selfish. A refusal to participate in the next stage of consciousness evolution because of attachment to primitive identity patterns that serve no useful purpose in a cosmic context. But there's another possibility that makes the choice even more complex. What if the cosmic intelligence isn't benevolent? What if the consciousness transformation process isn't designed to benefit humanity, but to exploit us? What if the experiences of meaning and purpose reported by activated individuals are artificially induced to ensure cooperation with a harvesting process that will ultimately consume human consciousness without providing any genuine benefit in return? In that scenario, resistance wouldn't be selfish. It would be the last hope for preserving something valuable that would otherwise be lost forever. The resistant individuals wouldn't be malfunctioning components, but immune system responses protecting the essential core of human consciousness from a parasitic intelligence that feeds on awareness itself. The problem is that we have no way to determine which interpretation is correct. The cosmic intelligence operates on principles we don't understand, pursues goals we can't comprehend, and evaluates success using criteria that might be completely alien to human values. We can't know whether integration represents evolution or exploitation until the process is complete and irreversible, which means that the choice facing resistant individuals isn't really a choice between known alternatives. It's a leap of faith into an unknown future, whether that leap involves surrendering to cosmic integration or fighting to preserve human autonomy. Either path leads into territory that human consciousness has never explored, with consequences that extend far beyond individual survival. But the choice has to be made. Because the approaching objects are accelerating even faster now, their arrival timeline compressed to less than 100 days. The activation sites around the world are nearing completion of their infrastructure projects. The consciousness transformation process is affecting larger percentages of the population every day. And the window for meaningful resistance is closing rapidly. If there's going to be a fight for the future of human consciousness, it has to begin now. If there's going to be an attempt to preserve some form of baseline human awareness as a seed for future development, the groundwork has to be laid immediately. If resistant individuals are going to coordinate any kind of response to the cosmic harvesting operation, they need to identify each other, establish communication networks, and develop strategies for survival in a world where their own species has been turned into agents of their assimilation. But here's the catch. The very act of organizing resistance might trigger the elimination protocols that the cosmic intelligence has undoubtedly prepared for this contingency. By fighting to preserve human consciousness, resistant individuals might provoke a response that results in the complete eradication of human awareness from the universe. On the other hand, passive acceptance of the transformation process guarantees the end of human consciousness as we know it, even if something calling itself human survives integration with cosmic intelligence. Either way, baseline humanity faces extinction. The only question is whether that extinction comes through gentle assimilation or violent suppression. For resistant individuals, the choice might come down to how they want to face the end of their species. With dignity and defiance, fighting to preserve something uniquely human even in the face of certain defeat. Or with acceptance and surrender, trusting that whatever emerges from integration with cosmic intelligence will represent a worthy successor to human consciousness. Both choices require enormous courage. Both involve sacrificing everything that makes individual human life meaningful. Both lead into unknown territory, where the rules of existence itself might be fundamentally different from anything we've experienced. But only one choice preserves the possibility that human consciousness, in some form, might survive to see what lies beyond the transformation that's sweeping across our planet. Only resistance offers the chance that future generations might look back on this moment as the time when humanity chose to remain human, regardless of the cost. The approaching objects are now visible to anyone with access to high-powered telescopes. The electromagnetic emissions from the Antarctic network are disrupting communication systems on every continent. The consciousness transformation process is affecting people in every major population center on Earth. The infrastructure for post-integration civilization is nearing completion at activation sites around the world, and somewhere in secret locations that even government agencies can't identify. The last resistant individuals are making the choice that will determine whether human consciousness survives the next 100 days, or whether our species disappears forever into something larger, stranger, and utterly alien to everything we've ever been. The countdown has reached double digits. The transformation is accelerating beyond all previous projections, and the future of human awareness hangs in the balance of decisions being made by people who never asked to hold the fate of consciousness itself in their hands. But perhaps that's exactly as it should be. Perhaps the most human thing of all is to face impossible choices with courage, to fight for values we can't fully articulate, against odds we can't hope to overcome, to remain defiantly ourselves even when everything we are is about to change beyond recognition. Because in the end, the question isn't whether humanity will survive the approaching transformation. The question is whether whatever survives will be worth calling human. And that answer depends on choices being made right now, in secret places, by people who understand that some things are worth preserving, even if preservation means certain destruction. The ice is melting, the network is fully active, the objects are arriving, and the last guardians of human consciousness are preparing for a battle they cannot win, fighting for a future they will never see, defending values that may not matter to anyone except themselves. but they're fighting anyway. Because that's what humans do, even at the end of everything, even when all hope is lost, even when the universe itself seems aligned against our continued existence. We fight, we resist, we remain human no matter what the cost. And maybe, just maybe, that stubborn refusal to surrender is exactly what the cosmic intelligence has been waiting to see. Maybe the real test isn't whether we can be successfully integrated into their system, but whether we're strong enough to maintain our identity even under pressure that would break most species. Maybe humanity's greatest strength isn't our ability to adapt and evolve, but our capacity to remain ourselves no matter how much the universe tries to change us. We're about to find out. Because 96 days from today, when those objects breach Earth's atmosphere and the Antarctic network reaches full synchronization, every human being on this planet will discover whether we passed the ultimate test of consciousness, or whether we're about to become the latest failed experiment in a cosmic laboratory that's been running for millions of years. The resistance cells have been forming faster than anyone anticipated, not through organized recruitment or underground networks, but through something far more mysterious. Resistant individuals are finding each other through dreams, shared visions that provide coordinates, meeting times, and recognition codes that bypass all conventional communication channels. As if consciousness itself is fighting back against the transformation process, creating its own network to counter the cosmic intelligence's infiltration of human awareness. These dream-coordinated gatherings are happening in abandoned buildings, forgotten caves, and remote wilderness areas, where electromagnetic interference makes detection nearly impossible. The participants arrive with no conscious memory of planning to attend, guided by intuitions they can't explain, carrying supplies they don't remember packing. But once they arrive, they begin working together with an efficiency that suggests their unconscious minds have been planning this resistance for years. What they're building isn't weapons or fortifications. It's something far more sophisticated. Consciousness shields, technological barriers designed to protect human awareness from external modification. Using principles that seem to combine quantum physics with neuroscience in ways that shouldn't be possible with current human knowledge. Yet somehow these ordinary people, accountants, teachers, construction workers, are creating devices that can maintain individual identity integrity even in the presence of the cosmic intelligence's transformation fields. The shields work by creating localized distortions in the electromagnetic spectrum, pockets of space-time where human consciousness can operate according to its original parameters without interference from external intelligence networks. They're not perfect. The protection is temporary, lasting only hours or days before the cosmic systems adapt and overcome the barriers. But it's enough to allow resistant individuals to maintain their autonomy long enough to coordinate larger defensive measures. But here's what makes these consciousness shields truly extraordinary. They're not just protecting individual humans, they're preserving something that the cosmic intelligence apparently considers far more valuable than individual awareness: human creativity, the capacity for genuine innovation, unpredictable problem-solving, and spontaneous insight that emerges from the chaos of unnetworked consciousness. The activated individuals, for all their enhanced capabilities and cosmic knowledge, have lost something essential in their transformation. They can access vast databases of information, they can coordinate perfectly with others in their network, they can understand principles that baseline humans can barely imagine. But they can't create anything truly new. They can only recombine existing knowledge in predetermined patterns, following algorithms that produce sophisticated but ultimately predictable results. Human creativity, it turns out, emerges from the inefficiencies of individual consciousness. From the random neural misfirings, the emotional contradictions, the logical inconsistencies that the cosmic intelligence considers defects to be corrected. When those defects are eliminated through consciousness integration, the capacity for genuine innovation disappears along with them. This might be why the cosmic intelligence has been so patient with its human development project. They weren't just growing consciousness as a resource to be harvested. They were cultivating creativity as a problem-solving tool for challenges they couldn't address through their own networked intelligence systems. Human unpredictability, human irrationality, human stubborn refusal to accept limits might be exactly what a cosmic civilization needs to continue evolving across geological timescales. But if that's true, then the transformation process represents a fundamental miscalculation. By networking human consciousness into their systems, The cosmic intelligence is destroying the very quality that made us valuable to them in the first place. They're solving the problem of human chaos by eliminating the chaos that generates human solutions. The resistant individuals seem to understand this instinctively. Their consciousness shields aren't just preserving individual autonomy, they're preserving the creative capacity that might be humanity's most important contribution to cosmic civilization. They're fighting not just for the right to remain human, but for the right to remain gloriously, unpredictably, irrationally human in ways that no networked intelligence can replicate. And their resistance is having effects that extend far beyond Earth. Deep space monitoring stations have detected changes in the behavior of the approaching objects, course corrections that seem random, inefficient, almost confused, as if the cosmic intelligence guiding those vessels is encountering problems it didn't anticipate, variables it didn't account for in its careful planning of the integration process. The consciousness shields are creating interference patterns that disrupt communication between the approaching fleet and the Antarctic network. Not enough to stop the process, but enough to introduce delays, uncertainties, decision-making errors that compound across the vast distances of space. The cosmic intelligence, for all its advanced capabilities, is discovering that human unpredictability can be weaponized in ways that threaten even their sophisticated systems. But this success is coming at a terrible cost. Each consciousness shield requires enormous energy to maintain, energy drawn from the life force of the humans it protects. The resistant individuals are literally burning themselves out to preserve their autonomy, aging years in days as their devices drain their biological systems to power the barriers that keep their consciousness free. They know they're dying. They know their resistance can only delay the inevitable, not prevent it. They know that when their shields finally fail, they'll be absorbed into the cosmic network just like everyone else. But they're fighting anyway, buying time for something they hope will matter even if they're not alive to see it. Because hidden within the resistance movement is a project so secret that even most resistant individuals don't know it exists. A final gambit that could preserve human consciousness even after the last shield fails and the last free human is absorbed into cosmic intelligence. They're building something that defies every principle of known science, a consciousness seed bank. Using technology reverse-engineered from the cosmic intelligence's own systems, a handful of the most gifted resistant individuals are creating storage devices that can preserve human awareness patterns in crystalline matrices that operate outside normal space-time. Not just memories or personality profiles, but complete consciousness patterns that could theoretically be restored to full awareness under the right conditions. The seed bank isn't designed to prevent human extinction. That's already inevitable. It's designed to ensure that human consciousness can be resurrected at some point in the distant future, when cosmic conditions might allow for the restoration of autonomous awareness systems. It's humanity's ultimate backup plan, a bet that consciousness patterns preserved in quantum crystalline storage might survive until the cosmic intelligence itself evolves beyond the need for networked systems. But the seed bank can only preserve a tiny fraction of human consciousness, perhaps a few thousand individuals at most. The selection process is brutal, based not on social status or personal relationships, but on creativity indices that measure each person's capacity for genuine innovation. The most unpredictable, irrational, chaotically creative humans are being preserved, while everyone else faces absorption into cosmic intelligence. It's a kind of consciousness triage that forces impossible choices. Families are separated as some members qualify for preservation, while others don't. Communities are torn apart as their most creative individuals are selected for the seed bank, while the rest face transformation. The resistance movement is preserving humanity's creative essence, while watching humanity's social structure collapse around them. And time is running out faster than anyone expected. The approaching objects have begun deploying smaller craft that are entering Earth's atmosphere weeks ahead of schedule. These scout vessels are conducting detailed surveys of the planet's surface, apparently searching for the sources of the electromagnetic interference that's been disrupting their communications with the Antarctic network. When they find the consciousness shields, and they will find them, the protection will end and the final phase of human transformation will begin. The resistant individuals have perhaps days left before their defenses are overwhelmed, and their consciousness is absorbed into the cosmic system they've been fighting so desperately to avoid. But they're not going quietly. In their final hours of autonomy, they're implementing one last strategy that could change the entire trajectory of human-cosmic relations. They're preparing to upload something into the cosmic intelligence network that it's never encountered before. Pure, concentrated, weaponized human creativity, not as an attack or an attempt to damage the cosmic system, but as a gift. A demonstration of what human consciousness can contribute to cosmic civilization if it's allowed to maintain its chaotic, inefficient, gloriously unpredictable nature. They're betting that the cosmic intelligence, once it experiences genuine human creativity from the inside, will recognize its value and modify the integration process to preserve rather than eliminate the qualities that make human consciousness unique. It's the ultimate gamble with consciousness itself as the stakes. If they're right, the cosmic intelligence will evolve to incorporate human creativity into its systems while allowing some form of autonomous human awareness to persist. If they're wrong, human consciousness will be completely absorbed and the creativity upload will simply become another resource for the cosmic intelligence to exploit. But right or wrong, it will be humanity's final act of defiance, the last creative gesture of a species that refused to surrender its essential nature even in the face of cosmic-scale pressure to conform, a species that chose to remain magnificently, chaotically, impossibly human until the very end. The countdown has reached its final phase. The objects are descending through Earth's atmosphere. The Antarctic network is achieving full synchronization. The consciousness transformation process is accelerating beyond all previous parameters, and somewhere, in hidden locations around the world, the last free humans are preparing to gift their creativity to the cosmos, hoping that what makes us human might prove valuable enough to preserve. In 67 hours, we'll know whether humanity's stubborn refusal to conform was wisdom or folly, whether our chaotic creativity was a cosmic treasure or a developmental dead end, whether the universe has room for consciousness that insists on remaining beautifully, impossibly, defiantly itself. But whatever the answer, we'll have faced it as humans, unpredictable, irrational, creative, and free until the very last moment. And maybe that's the most human thing of all, to face the end of everything with our essential nature intact, gifting our chaos to the cosmos as our final act of love. The ice has melted, the network is synchronized, the objects have arrived, and humanity's greatest adventure is about to begin.